Chapter 1 Data Representation, Lesson 1.1 Binary System. Now, let's start. What is a computer? Computer is an electronic machine made by people, which is specifically the picture above. The computer operates under the control of instructions stored in its own memory. Computer role. The computer's main role is to process data. This is what basically the computer has to do. Process input data to give us output. I'm going to give you an example here. Let's take this employee that is going to the company. On his first day, he has his input data, which is his fingerprint. He puts his fingerprint on the fingerprint machine. The machine processes the data, which is the image of his fingerprint that came from the machine. After it's processed, it knows that this is the employee that works in that company, and the result is sending a message to the door to open. So this is a brief example about how data is processed through several steps, through processors, through input and output. As you can see, the input was the fingerprint on the fingerprint machine, and the output was the result, which is the door opening. Now, let's talk about data. Data is mainly two parts. It may be facts, and it also may be figures. So basically, data can be words, data can be numbers, or data may also be sounds. So this may be input or maybe output. It's generally data. Now let's talk about the processor. The processor processes the stored data. Let's just say it's like a machine that reads certain inputs, works on them, or let's just say processes them, and then gives us the output. I'm going to give you an example here. Let's take the input data 1 plus 9. So this is the input data. We gave the computer, the processor basically, the task to solve 1 plus 9. This was our input data. Now what the computer has to do is to process the data through the processing and sorts it out and gives us the output data, which is basically the result to our input, which was 1 plus 9, and the output data was 10. This is just a brief example for you to know how the processes work. It needs two elements. It needs the input and it gives you the output. And finally, the processed data will be stored. The processor will store the result inside the computer memory. So such results are always stored within the computer's memory that the computer uses later on within other tasks. So, the processor stores the data using electronic switches. Now I'm going to explain this more precisely. What I mean by electronic switches, which are basically here in this figure represented as on and off, let's just say there are two messages. The first message that is given is on. It has electronic charges that sends signals to the processor, and it also has an off signal, which is an empty signal that doesn't have any single electronic charge, which is basically null. It's zero. And this also is read by the processor in a certain way. So the processor depends on these two, the on and the off. The on and the off is basically what we call the binary language. Yes, this is what you want to finally know. The binary language. Binary is an electronic language used by the computer to process data. Now, talking about binary, the word binary is something coming from two things. We're talking bi here, and bi represents two. So it has two things. As I was saying, there were two light bulbs, the on one and the off. The one that has the electronic charges and the one that doesn't. The one that has it is basically the one. It's something tangible. And the one that doesn't have anything is the null, the zero. So the language is basically as simple as that. A sequence and order of ones and zeros, as you can see in this picture, that is read by the processor in a certain binary language to give the certain results for the required input. This is an example here. You have 10 100 10. This is the binary language.